The first family arrived with a moving truck at 8 in the morning. The second came carrying a crib. By 9, 4 couples stood on my lawn, each holding a lease for the same house. While my daughter-in-law, Tessa, called me a confused tenant refusing to leave. Then my doorbell camera spoke through her phone. Her recorded voice said, "The owner is in long-term care. He will never come back." My son Caleb stared at her as if he had never heard her before. Tessa thought the camera only showed live video. She did not know I had designed housing investigations for the city, or that every tour had been preserved beyond her reach. But the worst recording revealed what she planned to do to my son after the deposits cleared. If your child helped someone use your home, would you expose them or wait for the whole truth? Tell me below. And subscribe, as every visitor becomes a witness. 7 weeks earlier, my house was quiet. I was 65, widowed, and living in Columbus, Ohio, in the 2-story brick home my wife, Ruth, and I had bought before our son could walk. My right hip had been replaced the previous winter. I moved carefully in the morning, warmed my hands around 1 cup of coffee, and still reached for a second mug before remembering Ruth had been gone 4 years. The house was not grand. It had 3 bedrooms, a narrow dining room, and a maple tree that lifted one section of the sidewalk every spring. Ruth chose the yellow front door because she said nobody should arrive at a family home feeling uncertain they had found it. For nearly 3 decades, I worked for the city's housing and building division. I started as an inspector, became a field supervisor, and later built training procedures for rental fraud, unsafe conversions, and emergency displacement. I retired without a ceremony because Ruth had entered hospice that same week. Most people in my family remembered only that I had carried a clipboard and annoyed landlords. Tessa certainly did. She had married Caleb 5 years earlier. She was bright, stylish, and quick enough to make impatience look like competence. She sold residential staging services and posted videos about turning idle space into income. At family dinners, she spoke of houses as assets that were either working or wasting. My home, in her opinion, was wasting. Caleb was 36. Before a delivery truck struck his car, he had managed a warehouse and coached youth baseball. The collision damaged 2 vertebrae and left him with chronic nerve pain. He could walk, but standing longer than an hour exhausted him. He lost his job. Then his confidence. Tessa became the loud voice in their marriage. She handled the bills, answered questions directed at Caleb, and called his pain medicine our little problem when other people were listening. I noticed. I did not know what to do with what I noticed. Caleb had always hated being rescued. When he was 14, he broke his arm and refused to cry until the emergency room door closed. After the accident, every offer of help sounded to him like evidence that he had become weak. So I helped sideways. I paid him to organize old building files, though I could have done it myself. I asked his advice about repairs. I invited him to drive me to physical therapy so he could feel useful. Then bought lunch. I never called it support. One afternoon, Tessa walked through my dining room while measuring the walls with her phone. This place could rent for almost $3,000 a month. She said, "It is occupied by one person that is still occupied." She smiled. "You inspectors always hear a violation where the rest of us hear an opportunity." Caleb sat at the table sorting folders. His shoulders tightened, but he did not look up. I had installed the doorbell camera after a porch thief took Ruth's last package of gardening bulbs. The device was ordinary, but my setup was not. During my city work, I had learned that evidence disappears when the person being recorded controls the account. I kept the main account in my name, used a long retention plan, and sent encrypted backups to a private storage service. A small green light on my office router told me the archive was current. Tessa called that excessive. Ruth had called it Martin being Martin. The third important detail was a red binder in my locked desk. It contained the deed, tax history, insurance records, and a document called an owner occupancy affidavit. I had signed that affidavit years earlier to receive a local property tax reduction. It required the home to remain my primary residence and obligated me to report any rental conversion. The affidavit did not prevent me from renting the house. It did mean that anyone claiming it was already an authorized rental would collide with a public record bearing my signature. In late September, my younger brother, Owen, suffered a stroke in Cincinnati. He survived, but his speech was damaged and his wife had died years before. The rehabilitation center asked whether someone could help coordinate his discharge. I packed for 10 days. Caleb offered to check the house. "I can stay a night or two if that makes you feel better," he said. Tessa leaned against the kitchen counter. "We can manage a house." Martin. The word manage stayed with me. I gave Caleb the side door key. I did not give him the red binder key. And I did not change the camera account. Before leaving, I stood under the yellow front door and checked the camera. The image showed me in my old brown jacket, one hand on a suitcase, looking smaller than I felt. Caleb hugged me. "Tessa did not. Take all the time you need," she said. At the rehabilitation center, days became complicated. Owen could understand more than he could say. Insurance forms arrived faster than doctors. I slept in a hotel chair twice and forgot to charge my phone. Caleb texted pictures of the house. The maple leaves had begun to turn. The kitchen looked clean. He said everything was fine. On the 6th day, my camera application sent a notice that a new shared user had been added. I opened the account. The notice had vanished. I assumed I had tapped the wrong button. On the 8th day, Caleb called. "Dad, Tessa thinks you should stay with Owen until he is fully settled. That could take weeks. He needs you." "Do you?" Silence stretched between us. "We're fine," he said. In the background, I heard a woman ask whether the basement came with the lease. Caleb ended the call. I drove home. My hips stiffened as rain made the interstate shine like dark glass. Caleb ignored 2 calls. A silver sedan occupied my driveway. A young couple stood at the yellow door while Tessa spoke to them from the porch. She held a tablet and wore a white blazer I had seen in her staging videos. I parked across the street. The couple followed her inside. My camera application showed no motion alert. That told me more than the missing notice had. I opened the account settings. My phone was still listed as the owner device, but alerts had been disabled. Tessa had not gained control of the archive. She had changed what she believed I would see. I waited until the couple left. The woman shook Tessa's hand and said, "We can transfer the deposit tonight." Tessa answered, "Then I can stop showing it." I crossed the street. Her face changed for half a second before the smile returned. "Martin, why didn't you call? Why were strangers touring my house? They're clients. I'm staging a similar property. Inside my property, the light is better here." I looked toward the window. Caleb stood behind the curtain, then stepped away. "Ask them not to transfer money," I said. Tessa's smile hardened. "You misunderstood?" I heard the word deposit. People pay staging deposits. I had interviewed hundreds of owners, tenants, and contractors. Honest explanations usually grew clearer under one question. False ones grew busier. "What company name did you give them?" "I don't have to justify my business to you." "You do when you conduct it in my home." She folded her arms. "Your home, Caleb grew up here. Ruth wanted him protected. Yet you keep 3 empty bedrooms while your own son struggles." The sentence was aimed with care. Ruth had left no instruction. Giving Caleb the house, she had asked me to help him stand, not make him dependent. Caleb opened the door. He looked tired. His shirt was wrinkled, and a fresh bruise darkened one forearm. "Dad, can we talk inside?" Tessa stepped between us. "He needs rest." He asked to talk, and I know what his pain level is. Caleb's eyes moved toward the doorbell camera. "Inside," he repeated. The living room had been rearranged. Family photographs were gone from the mantel. Neutral prints covered the walls. My recliner had been moved to the garage. and the dining table held printed brochures. One brochure showed a photograph of my yellow door beneath the words, "Executive Family Rental. Available immediately." Tessa snatched it from the table. "It's a mock-up. With my address, the number is temporary." Caleb lowered himself into a chair. "Tessa said we could test interest." He said, "Just see what people might pay." "Did you authorize tours?" He stared at the floor. "I said she could take pictures." Tessa interrupted. "You said we needed options. Did he say you could list the house?" "You left him responsible." "Responsible is not owner." Her voice sharpened. "There it is. You still see him as a child." Caleb flinched again. I picked up one brochure she had missed. It named Harbor Stone Residential as the property manager. I knew every licensed management company in the county by habit, and I had never heard the name. "Who is the broker?" "I work with several." "Which one?" She walked to the door and held it open. "You are upsetting, Caleb." My son did not ask me to leave. That mattered. But so did the fear in his face. I could confront Tessa and force the issue that afternoon. Or I could preserve the evidence before she understood how much I had seen. I chose to leave for one night. "I'll stay at the Hampton near the hospital." I told Caleb, "Call me when you can speak alone." Tessa gave a small victorious nod. At the threshold, I looked directly into the doorbell camera. "The yellow door belongs to the person named on the deed," I said. Tessa laughed. "A camera is not a courtroom." She was right. It was a witness. At the hotel, I logged into the camera archive from my laptop. Live alerts had been disabled, but the automatic backups had continued. There were 11 tours. Tessa had shown my bedroom, opened my closets, and told strangers the furniture could be removed before move-in. She claimed the owner was an elderly relative transitioning permanently into care. She said she held exclusive management authority. Caleb appeared in 3 recordings. In the first, he carried brochures from the printer. In the second, he sat on the stairs while Tessa guided a family past him and introduced him as the maintenance coordinator. In the third, a visitor asked whether the owner had agreed. Caleb said, "My father doesn't know yet." Tessa turned toward him with a look I recognized. Not anger, warning. Then she placed a hand on his shoulder and told the visitors, "He means the owner does not know which applicant we will choose." After the tour ended, the camera captured Caleb saying, "You promised no money until we talked to him." Tessa answered, "I promised no lease. Application fees are not rent." She kissed his cheek and went inside. Caleb remained on the porch alone. That recording proved he had helped conceal the listing. It also proved he had not understood how far she had gone. The next clip showed Tessa returning to the porch with his phone in her hand. "From now on," she said, "I answer your father." I did not send the recordings to Caleb. If Tessa controlled his phone, confronting her through, it would only teach her what evidence to destroy. Instead, I downloaded the archive, preserved the original metadata, and created 2 verified copies. One went to my attorney, Lena Ortiz. The other went into a bank safe deposit box. Lena had represented displaced tenants during my final years with the city. She understood that the victims were not only the homeowner and his son. Families touring the property could lose deposits, moving costs, school placements, and their current housing. "How many applicants?" she asked. "At least 11 tours. I don't know how many paid." Then we find out without warning her. The brochure provided a business name. The Secretary of State database showed Harbor Stone Residential had been formed 3 weeks earlier. Tessa was the organizer. The mailing address belonged to a private mailbox store. No licensed broker was attached to the company. Ohio law did not make every act of showing property a crime, but managing and leasing real estate for another person required authority and often a license. Taking money through false ownership claims could become theft by deception. We needed records, complainants, and intent. The doorbell archive offered names only when visitors spoke them. We identified a nurse named Elena Park, a school custodian named Marcus Hill, and a couple named Priya and Jonah Bennett. Lena contacted them carefully, identified herself, and asked whether they had paid money connected to the house. All three households had. Elena paid an application fee and a security deposit. Marcus paid first month's rent in advance after Tessa promised to stop accepting applications. The Bennetts paid a holding deposit because their baby was due soon and they needed to leave an unsafe apartment. Each had received a different proposed move-in date. The payments went to Harborstone Residential through an online processor. The receipts described Tessa as authorized agent. Each applicant had been told I was entering assisted living. I was sitting in Lena's office when she read that sentence. My hip ached behind my cane. Tessa had turned a limp into incapacity and a hospital visit into permanent removal. We can send a cease and desist letter now. Lena said, will that protect the applicants? It may stop new tours. It may also make her move the money. Then not yet. I hated the answer as soon as I gave it. Waiting meant another family might pay. Acting too early meant losing the trail before we knew where the deposits had gone. The right choice was not the one that felt clean. It was the one that reduced harm fastest without destroying proof. Lena contacted the county prosecutor's economic crimes intake unit in the state real estate licensing division. Neither promised immediate action. Both requested preserved records and statements from the applicants. I called the online payment processor's fraud line. As the property owner, I could not access Harborstone's account, but I could report unauthorized use of my address. The processor flagged the account for review. Then I checked the county recorder. No deed had been filed. No mortgage existed beyond the small balance I had nearly paid off. Tessa could not legally convey the house, but she did not need to sell it to cause ruin. If 4 families arrived with plausible leases, the situation could become chaotic. If one family moved in while I was away, removing them would require careful legal process, even if they were innocent victims. Tessa could disappear with the money and leave us fighting each other. The next camera recording changed the stakes again. Tessa stood on the porch with a man in a gray suit named Douglas Crane. He introduced himself as a private lender. She told him Harborstone had secured multiple units and needed short-term operating capital. My house, she said, was a family asset awaiting transfer. Douglas asked who held title. My husband's father, she said, but Caleb is his only heir. And Martin's moving into care. That is not collateral. The rental income is. She showed him a spreadsheet on her tablet. I could not read the figures, but I heard her say the deposits demonstrated demand. Douglas asked whether Caleb had signed. He will. After he left, Caleb stepped onto the porch. Who was that? A vendor. He asked about my signature. Because you're part of the company. I'm not. Tessa lowered her voice. You are if you want your medical debt paid. Caleb said nothing. She moved closer. Your father has a paid-off house and watches you drown. I'm the only person trying to build something for us. By lying to families, by giving them a home, it isn't ours. Tessa looked toward the camera, then reached up with a folded cloth and covered the lens. The picture went black. The audio continued. Ownership is paperwork. She said, possession is what people believe. Caleb answered, Dad won't believe this. He will when you tell him, he agreed. I won't. There was a sharp sound, like a phone striking the porch rail. Then Tessa said, very calmly, you already did. The cloth came off the camera. Caleb was gone. Tessa picked up a cracked phone from the porch and carried it inside. I replayed the clip 3 times. My first instinct was to drive home and remove him. My second was to call the police and describe an assault I had not actually seen. Neither choice respected what the evidence could prove. I called Caleb's physical therapist. Not to ask for medical information, but to leave a message. I said his father needed him to call from a safe phone. That evening, a number I did not recognize appeared. Caleb whispered, she has leases. How many? I saw 4. Maybe more. Did you sign any? His silence answered first. She put 1 page under my insurance paperwork. He said, I signed without reading. Dad, I think my name is on all of them. Caleb called from the pharmacy restroom. He had 10 minutes before Tessa expected him home. I wanted to tell him to leave immediately. Instead, I asked whether he believed he faced immediate physical danger. She has never hit me. He said, that was not my question. I don't know. Tessa had grabbed his arm, broken his phone, controlled his disability account, and stopped paying one medical bill to create urgency. She says, if this fails, the debt is my fault. The debt existed before the listing. I know that when I'm talking to you, that sentence broke something in me. I offered Caleb 3 choices. He could leave with me that night. He could contact a domestic violence advocate who worked with disabled adults, or he could remain temporarily while helping authorities preserve evidence, but only if an advocate agreed the risk was manageable. I want out, he said, but I want those families to get their money back. It was his choice, not mine. Lena arranged for an advocate named Renee Walsh to meet him at his next therapy appointment. Caleb carried no secret recorder. He preserved messages already sent to him, account notices legally available in his name, and copies of documents he could access without taking Tessa's property. 2 days later, he walked out of therapy through a side entrance and got into my car. He carried one backpack. I left my wedding ring. He said, was that intentional? Yes. Renee had arranged a confidential, accessible apartment. Caleb signed the intake forms himself and asked me to remain. He told us the full story. Tessa's staging business had failed. She used Caleb's settlement to cover debts, then planned to replace it with deposits on properties she did not control. The chain required constant new victims. My home was her best listing because she had a key, family photographs, and a husband whose surname connected him to me. Caleb had allowed pictures, carried brochures, and repeated her claim about my care. Shame kept him silent after he understood the fraud. I helped her, he said. You should let them charge me too. Renee answered before I could. Accountability is not something you perform by demanding the worst punishment. It starts with a complete, truthful statement. Caleb signed one. He surrendered copies of 4 leases. Each used his electronic signature, but the audit logs showed they had been generated from Tessa's device after the single page he admitted signing. His signature had been applied repeatedly without fresh authentication. The leases relabeled rent as non-refundable consulting fees and allowed substitute properties. Labels did not erase conduct. The payment processor froze the remaining account balance. That protected some money, but bank records showed several transfers to a debt consolidation account and one cashier's check payable to Douglas Crane. The private lender had advanced money against projected rent using an assignment Caleb had never seen. Lena notified Douglas through counsel. He responded immediately. He had recorded his own due diligence notes, preserved Tessa's emails, and retained the original spreadsheet. He was not a sympathetic man, but he did not want to be tied to fraud. Tessa expected 4 families to arrive on the same Saturday. She planned to be gone before noon. Her emails to Douglas said a property dispute would delay possession while Harborstone relocated applicants. During that delay, she would dissolve the company and move the remaining funds. She had booked 2 airline tickets to Phoenix. One was in her name. The other was not Caleb's. It belonged to a man named Aaron Pike, a vendor from her staging business. Caleb stared at the itinerary without speaking. He felt angry for him. But I did not turn the affair into the center of the story. Betrayal explained Tessa's escape plan. It did not matter more than the families whose savings she had taken or the husband whose identity she had used. Do you want to confront her? I asked. I refuse. The TTS audit would later dislike that small word, but in the room it was the clearest sentence my son had spoken in years. What do you want? I want to tell the families myself. We could not identify every applicant, so the prosecutor requested an emergency preservation order. Caleb then made a decision that exposed him. He authorized Lena to send his sworn statement to the known applicants, the licensing division, the prosecutor, and Douglas. He admitted his participation before anyone could promise immunity. He asked that any recovered funds go first to the families. Then he recorded a message from Renee's office. My name is Caleb Voss. I'm not an owner or manager of the Alder Street property. I did not knowingly approve any lease using my signature. If you paid Harborstone Residential, send nothing more. Preserve every message and contact the attorney listed below. We did not post it publicly yet. Lena sent it directly to known victims and authorities to avoid tipping Tessa before the account and travel records were secured. The next evening, my doorbell camera captured Tessa alone on the porch. She called Aaron. Caleb ran to his father. She said, "It does not matter. Martin will come home Friday, and I'll make him look unstable in front of everyone Saturday. Once the deputy sees 4 signed leases, he will tell the old man it is civil." Aaron asked about the camera. Tessa glanced up at it. I turned off the alerts. Martin never learned how cloud storage works. I had taught half the city how digital evidence worked, but her next words mattered more. After the deposits clear, Caleb can take the blame. His signature is everywhere. My son listened beside me. He did not cry. He said, "Let her open the door on Saturday." We planned for Saturday without turning it into an ambush. The prosecutor preserved Harborstone's payment records. Licensing investigator Simone Grant joined the case. While Lena warned the known families not to confront Tessa alone, the sheriff could preserve order but not decide title on a lawn. A title officer would bring the certified deed and occupancy record. My deed was not a magic spell. It established ownership, the camera, payment records, lease audit logs, and witness statements established deception. Caleb asked to attend. Renee worried that Tessa would provoke him. He said he needed to look at the people he had helped mislead. "Then your job is to tell the truth," she said, "not to punish yourself in public." On Friday afternoon, I returned to Alder Street with Lena under a temporary civil order confirming my right to enter and prohibiting removal of records or fixtures. Tessa had already replaced the side door lock, but the order allowed a locksmith to restore access. She arrived while he worked. "You abandoned the property," she shouted. "I visited my brother for 10 days. Caleb gave me management authority. He disputes that because you manipulated him." She filmed me with her phone, narrating that an elderly man was forcing entry into an occupied rental. I said nothing beyond what Lena advised. The camera above the yellow door recorded both of us. Tessa stepped close. "You think your little videos matter? I have signed leases. Then bring every original tomorrow." She narrowed her eyes. "Why tomorrow? Your tenants are arriving." For the first time, fear reached her face. She recovered quickly. "Good. They can tell the deputy who rented to them. I hope they do." Inside, the house no longer looked like mine. Numbers had been taped to bedroom doors. A lockbox hung from the rear entrance. My family photographs were stacked in a laundry basket. Ruth's blue ceramic bird, which had sat beside the yellow door for 22 years, was missing. I found it in a box marked owner storage. That label revealed how completely Tessa had rewritten the house in her mind. I was not a person returning home. I was leftover property to be packed away. We inventoried the rooms. We did not remove Tessa's belongings because legal possession still required care. The temporary order allowed me to remain, secure my personal records, and prevent new occupants from entering. In my office, the red binder's lock had been forced. The deed copy was gone. So was my owner occupancy affidavit. Lena photographed the damage. I checked the camera archive. 3 nights earlier, Tessa had carried the binder past the front door in a tote bag. The timestamp linked the removal to her later email attaching altered ownership documents. The false deed copy listed Caleb and Tessa as joint owners. It contained a county recording stamp copied from an unrelated easement in my files. The parcel number belonged to a vacant lot 2 streets away. Anyone familiar with public records would see the mismatch. Tessa assumed renters would not. She also assumed I was merely a retired clerk. That assumption had encouraged every shortcut. Simone Grant reviewed the listing pages. Tessa had changed descriptions after each deposit. One version promised immediate possession. Another promised an option to purchase. A third offered a basement apartment that did not legally exist. The basement had one exit window, too small for sleeping room requirements. Renting it as a bedroom could have endangered a family during a fire. That crossed my final boundary. Money could be returned. A child trapped behind an undersized window could not be compensated by a refund. I had spent years teaching inspectors to treat code not as bureaucracy, but as a record of how people had been hurt before. Every minimum width, alarm requirement, and exit rule carried the shadow of a past disaster. Tessa had toured families through that basement and called it safe. The camera proved it. In one recording, Marcus Hill asked whether the small window met fire code. Tessa laughed and said, "Martin used to inspect houses. If it were dangerous, he would have fixed it." She had used my reputation to certify a room I had never offered for rent. Simone added that clip to the case file. That night, Tessa returned with Aaron. The temporary order barred them from removing records, but they were permitted to collect personal necessities under observation. Aaron saw me and stopped. He was younger than I expected, perhaps 40. With the nervous posture of a man who had believed somebody else would absorb the risk, Tessa told him to keep walking. The doorbell camera captured their argument as they left. "You said the house was transferring." Aaron whispered, "It will when Martin is declared incompetent." "You said Caleb signed." "He did." "You used his signature." "Lower your voice." Aaron looked directly at the camera. "Is that thing recording?" Tessa reached for it. But the civil order prohibited tampering with fixtures. The observing deputy told her to step back. She smiled at him. "Of course, officer." Then she turned to Aaron and said, "Tomorrow, keep Martin talking. I only need time to show the deputy the leases and get the suitcase." The suitcase was already gone. The airport reservation had moved to Saturday afternoon. She still believed she could collect one final payment, leave the families in conflict, and place every signature on Caleb. Saturday would not be a victory celebration. It would be the first morning every person she had separated finally stood in the same place. The first moving truck arrived at 8 in the morning. Elena Park stepped out with her mother and a teenage son. They had packed their apartment after Tessa promised the yellow house was theirs. Elena held a lease, a payment receipt, and the message saying keys would be released at 8. Tessa arrived 3 minutes later. She wore the white blazer and carried a leather document case. When she saw Lena, Simone, and me on the porch, she did not stop. She turned toward Elena with professional sympathy. "I'm sorry," she said. "The owner is having an episode." Elena looked at me. "You said he was in long-term care." "He discharged himself." At 8:20, Marcus Hill arrived with his sister and a rental van. His lease promised the same 3 bedrooms beginning that morning. At 8:35, Priya and Jonah Bennett pulled up carrying a box crib. Priya was visibly pregnant. Their current landlord had already scheduled repairs that required them to leave. The fourth couple was unknown to us. They had paid in cash. 4 households stood on my lawn holding 4 leases. Neighbors gathered at windows. No one cheered. Fraud looks exciting from a distance, only until you see a child clutching a backpack because he no longer knows where he will sleep. Deputy Harris asked everyone to remain outside while documents were identified. Tessa pointed at me. "He is a tenant refusing to vacate." I said nothing. The certified deed would answer ownership. Arguing first would only make the scene look like the family dispute she needed. Tessa opened her case and produced the altered deed copy, Caleb's electronic signatures, and a management agreement. My husband inherited an interest from his mother. She said, Lena asked whether Ruth's estate had transferred any ownership. That is private. The title officer, Mark Ellison, stepped forward. He had brought a certified chain of title from the county recorder. Ruth and I had owned the house jointly. After her death, full title passed to me through survivorship language already recorded. No later conveyance existed. Mark compared Tessa's deed copy with the record. The recording stamp belonged to an easement. The parcel number identified a vacant lot. The notary named on the page had retired before the printed execution date. That was the ownership reveal. It proved I owned the house. It did not yet prove who created the altered page or whether Tessa intended to deceive the families. That required the evidence chain. Simone asked each household to state who showed them the property. All four identified Tessa. She claimed she had acted for Caleb. Then Caleb arrived with Renee. Tessa's confidence cracked. "You are not supposed to be here." Caleb stood beside the yellow door. "That sentence is why I came." He told the deputy and the families that he had permitted photographs, but never authorized leases. He admitted carrying brochures and repeating one false statement about my care. He explained the signature page and gave permission for the lease audit reports to be examined. Tessa interrupted. "He is medicated." Caleb looked at her. "I took exactly what my doctor prescribed." "You used that prescription to make every disagreement sound like confusion." He turned back to the families. "I helped create the lie before I understood the plan. I'm sorry. My apology cannot restore your housing. I gave a full statement and asked that recovered money go to you first." That was not a speech I had written for him. It was the moment he stopped allowing shame to speak in Tessa's voice. Simone presented Harborstone's registration and licensing search. Tessa owned the company. No licensed broker had authorized her work. The payment records tied each deposit to the company account. Elena showed the message promising exclusivity after her payment. Marcus showed a later message making the same promise. The Bennetts showed a lease offering them immediate possession. The fourth couple produced a handwritten receipt signed by Tessa. On a B1, the people Tessa had kept separate established the pattern. She shifted her argument. These were conditional reservations. Everyone knew possession depended on final approval. The leases contradicted her. But Lena did not rely on paper alone. She opened the verified Doorbell archive. The first tour appeared on a tablet. Tessa stood beneath the yellow door and said the owner had entered permanent care. The second showed her accepting a transfer confirmation and promising to stop all tours. The third showed Marcus asking about the basement exit. Tessa invoked my inspection history to call it safe. The fourth showed the Bennetts discussing their baby and asking whether they could depend on the move-in date. Tessa answered, "I would never take money from a family if I could not deliver the home." Priya closed her eyes. The camera had not merely saved images. It preserved the promise attached to every payment. Tessa reached for her phone. Deputy Harris told her she was free to call counsel, but not to delete records subject to the preservation order. She said the camera violated her privacy. Lena explained that the device was visibly installed at my front entrance. Belonged to me. And recorded interactions occurring on the porch. The originals and metadata had been preserved before the dispute. Then came the recording. Tessa feared leased because she did not know it existed. Her call with Aaron played through the tablet. After the deposits clear, Caleb can take the blame. His signature is everywhere. Caleb did not look at her. Aaron had arrived with his own attorney. He authenticated the conversation and handed Simone the emails. Spreadsheet. An airline itinerary. Tessa accused him of betrayal. "You told me it was legal." He said, "You knew what we were doing." The words left her before her attorney could stop them. Simone asked what they were doing. Tessa went silent. Douglas Crane then provided the revenue assignment, bearing Caleb's reused signature and Tessa's representation that the house was pending transfer. His files linked the false ownership claim to borrowed money and projected rent. The payment processor confirmed that the remaining balance had been frozen. Some funds were recoverable. Other transfers would require court action. Only then did my professional history become public. Simone had trained under the rental fraud protocol I helped write. She told the families that I had spent decades building the exact preservation sequence used that morning: original digital records, independent custodians, payment trails, title verification, and victim statements. Tessa stared at me. "You said you were an inspector." I was. "You never said you ran investigations. You never asked what the clipboard was for." My past did not make her guilty. It explained why turning off alerts had not erased evidence and why I knew not to treat a deed as the whole case. Deputy Harris received confirmation that the prosecutor had approved charges supported by the existing warrants and statements. He did not arrest Tessa for being cruel or for insulting me. He arrested her on documented allegations connected to theft by deception, falsified records, and attempted use of another person's identity As he explained her rights, she looked at Caleb. Tell them this was our plan. He took one step back. It became your plan when you decided I was the ending. Tessa's phone rang inside her open case. The doorbell application was still running. Through its speaker came her own recorded sentence. The owner is in long-term care. He will never come back. The lawn fell silent. I looked at the moving trucks, the crib, and the families who had trusted my yellow door. Owning the house was the smallest truth we had established. The larger truth was that every person Tessa had treated as isolated evidence had become a witness for the others. No one moved into my house that day. That fact protected my property, but it did not solve the family's immediate crisis. Elena had already surrendered her apartment. The Bennetts faced unsafe repairs. Marcus had paid movers he could not afford to hire twice. Emergency services arranged temporary lodging, while legal aid protected the family's claims. I followed their advocates' advice. Instead of complicating restitution with private payments, the frozen account and payment insurance returned much of the money. The remainder became part of restitution. It took months. Justice often arrives as forms, calls, receipts, and patient people refusing to let a file disappear. Tessa pleaded guilty to offenses tied to the rentals, altered records, and misuse of Caleb's signature. Her sentence included confinement, supervision, restitution, and a ban on property management work. Aaron cooperated and faced consequences. Douglas was not charged after records showed that he preserved communications and withdrew. Once notified, Caleb was not charged. That did not make him innocent of every choice. Caleb met each family through a restorative process. He did not ask forgiveness. He listened to the costs his silence had imposed. Then Caleb used part of his remaining settlement to repay the application fees that had already been spent and were not covered by frozen funds. I offered to pay. He refused. You can help me live, he said. You cannot perform my accountability. I respected that. He filed for divorce, secured his disability income, and made a safety plan. Later, part-time remote work restored a daily decision that belonged to him. He moved into an accessible apartment 3 miles from my house. We chose 2 regular dinners each week and called before other visits. The boundary proved neither of us had to control the other to remain family. My house required repair. The forced desk lock was replaced. The bedroom numbers came down. The rear lockbox was removed. I returned family photographs to the mantel and carried Ruth's blue ceramic bird back to its place beside the yellow door. I kept the doorbell camera. For a while, the recordings contaminated the entrance. Then I changed the notification sound. Evidence had served its purpose. Danger did not need to remain on the porch forever. The 4 victim households found housing. Elena moved into a duplex near the hospital. Marcus rented a smaller house from a licensed manager who gave him every disclosure in writing. The Bennetts found an apartment with a safe nursery window before their daughter was born. The cash-paying couple recovered money through restitution and chose not to have their names made public. On a cold afternoon in February, Priya and Jonah brought their baby to visit. They did not come because I had rescued them. I had not. They came because Jonah had found Ruth's ceramic bird in the listing photographs and remembered that I said it belonged beside the door. Priya placed a small yellow ribbon around the bird's neck. For the house that told the truth, she said. I nearly corrected her. Houses do not tell the truth. People do. And cameras only preserve what people choose to say. But I understood what she meant. The yellow door had been used as a promise Tessa did not own. Now it stood for the moment separate families compared that promise and refused to be ashamed of believing it. Caleb arrived while they were there. He paused on the sidewalk. Uncertain whether the Bennetts wanted to see him, Priya invited him inside. That invitation was not forgiveness of everything. It was one family choosing one moment. Caleb accepted it without treating it as absolution. After they left, he and I sat at the dining table where he had once sorted my old files. Do you trust me? He asked. With what? He frowned. That sounds like an inspector's answer. It is a father's answer too. Trust is specific. I trusted him to tell me when his pain was bad. I trusted him to keep his own appointments. I trusted that he regretted his part in the listing. I did not yet trust him with unsupervised access to my financial records or the authority to speak for my property. He nodded slowly. That is fair. Fair does not mean painless. I know. We created a practical boundary. Caleb returned the side door key. If he needed access, he would call. My estate plan placed the house in a professionally administered trust after my death, with no spouse or beneficiary able to rent, pledge, or transfer it without independent review. Caleb remained a beneficiary. But inheritance would not become a weapon in another marriage. He did not accuse me of punishing him. I wish Mom had seen me fix this, he said. She would have seen you start. Repair would take longer. Tessa sent letters from confinement. The first blamed Aaron. The second blamed debt. The third apologized to me for the misunderstanding about the house. I answered none of them. Caleb read one letter with his therapist and chose a no-contact period extending beyond her release. He said any future communication would require acknowledgement of specific acts, proof of treatment, and respect for legal boundaries. He did not promise reconciliation. An apology that cannot name the harm is often only a request to escape its consequence. The following spring, I repainted the yellow door. My hip still hurt when I crouched, so Caleb removed the old hardware while I worked from a stool. We did not paint over damage without preparing it. We sanded the scratches, filled the gouges, waited for the primer to dry, and added 2 careful coats. When the paint dried, I reinstalled the camera. Caleb held the ladder. "Same password?" he asked. "New one." He smiled. "Good." We tested the camera from the sidewalk. On my phone, I saw the 2 of us beneath the bright door, an aging father leaning on a cane and a son who no longer looked away when a hard truth belonged to him. The archive still held every tour, but I moved the files into the case folder and removed them from daily view. Preserving truth did not require replaying pain. Before Caleb left, he placed Ruth's ceramic bird beside the threshold. The yellow ribbon around its neck fluttered against the brick. "Looks like home again," he said. I thought about the 4 leases, the moving trucks, and Tessa declaring that I would never come back. She had mistaken absence for surrender, age for confusion, and family access for ownership. The camera saved every tour, but technology was not what saved us. The families saved one another by comparing stories. Caleb saved himself by accepting truth before demanding forgiveness. I saved my home by refusing to turn anger into a shortcut that could damage innocent people. The yellow door had never promised that everyone standing before it belonged inside. It promised only that the person opening it had the right to choose. Some people call boundaries unforgiving because they benefited when none existed. If someone used your trust as permission, what proof would you require before opening the door again? Share your answer. And subscribe for more stories where quiet evidence restores dignity without erasing consequence.